Good morning, all of you. This is time that we discuss the Indian areas. And we have already seen the early Indian writers in English language, starting with Kashi Prasad Ghosh and Suchi Chandradat. And the first English novel produced in India was written by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, entitled Rajmohan's Wife. And then he had also produced another famous book called Ananthamoorthy. And it is in Ananthamoorthy there is the popular Indian national song, Vande Mataram. And after Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyaya, we come to find Torudat and her famous poem, Our Koshreena Tree. A sheaf gleaned in the French fields was the collection of her poetry. And she produced two novels also, one in English and the other in French. And she was followed by Aurobindo. Aurobindo is known for his long epic poem Savitri. And he has also written a book called The Life of a Yogi. Aurobindo was a yogi and guru, and he started an ashram in Pondicherry. So in the beginning, he was a freedom fighter, but turned to become a sannyasi and guru. And he had brought out a big collection of poems. And there are many popular poems produced by Aurobindo. And he was also nominated twice for the Nobel Prize. But anyway, he didn't receive the Nobel. And after Aurobindo, we have seen Sarojini Naidu and her collection of poems and her sobriquet, the Nightingale of India. And she was also the first female president of Indian National Congress. And she became governor of an Indian state after independence. And she was the governor of UP at the time when she was dead. And after Sarojini Naidu, we come to find Tagore, a polymath. So was poet, playwright, novelist, story writer, freedom fighter, thinker, philosopher, sannyasi, educationalist, and he was a real polymath, and he has got his popular plays and poems, stories. And he is mainly popular for his Gitanjali, and there were 103 songs in Gitanjali of varying length. And when Gitanjali was first published in Bengali, there were 157 songs, but when it was produced in English, it had 103 songs. And there was also a preface written by W.B.H. And after all, Tagore won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913, the first person to receive a Nobel Prize from a non-European country, from the Asiatic country. And Tagore has got his popular Rabindra Nritta Natya, which include Chandalika, Chitrangada, and Shyama. And other plays of Tagore like Muktadara and then Dadgar or the Post Office were very popular. And W.H. produced the Dadgar as Post Office in the Abbey Theatre. And after Tagore, we come to find Nirad Chaudhary. And Chaudhary is known for a few of his books like The Autobiography of an Unknown Citizen. And it's a sequel, Thy Hand, Great Anarcha. And he produced the continent of Circe. And for that, he received the Duff Cooper Award also, Continent of Circe. And then his popular book, A Passage to England. And he has written many collection of essays also, like The east is east and the west is west. And he was a great supporter of the imperialist government. And he remained in England until his death. And he became naturalized as a British citizen. And he became very controversial in India for his great support for the British. And his autobiography is also dedicated to the memory of the British government. And then we come to find the novels written by the Indian writers in English. And there are the three crowns, Mulkraj Anand, R.K. Narayan, and Raja Rao. And Anand actually produced his first novel, Untouchables, in 1935. And it was followed by his next novel, Coolie, in 1936. And then Two Leaves and a Bud in 1937. And produced the three novels as a trilogy, The Village, Across the Black Waters, and The Sword and the Sickle. And the title of The Sword and the Sickle was given by George Orwell. And for his Untouchables, the foreword was written by E.M. Forster. And he is one of the very popular Indian writers in English, Mulkraj Anand. He was also a member of the Bloomsbury Group. And he had produced an autobiography, His Days in the Bloomsbury, Memoirs in the Bloomsbury. And he was awarded Sahitya Academy Award for his book, Morning Face. And it was part of his autobiography. And after Mulkraj Anand, we come to find R.K. Narayan. Narayan is also one of the leading writers in English. And he has immortalized a fictional South Indian town called Malgudi. And most of his novels are set in the Malgudi background. And the first novel was Swami and Friends, set in the Malgudi background. And it was followed by his other novels, like Bachelor of Arts, and then the Dark Room. And he was awarded Sahitya Academy Award for his novel Guide. The Guide was the one novel that won him Sahitya Academy Award. And he has got his very popular novels like Waiting for Mahatma. And all these are set in the Malgudi background. And after R.K. Narayan, we come to find Raja Rao, the third important Indian writer in English. And Raja Rao is known for his novels like Kantapura and The Serpent and the Rope. The Serpent and the Rope won him Sahitya Academy Awards. Kantapura was his first novel. It was produced in 1938. And we have to remember the chronology of the novels always. So from Mulkraj Anand, we come to find Untouchables, produced in 1935, Coolie in 1936, Two Leaves and a Bud in 1937. Then the trilogy consisting of The Village, Across the Black Waters, and The Sword and the Sickle came out in 1939, 1940, and 42. And after all, so he received the Sahitya Academy Award for his book, Morning Face. It was part of his autobiography. And the Academy Award came out in 1971. But the book was produced in 1968. And he wanted to produce a 7-part autobiography, but could complete only 3 parts of the autobiography. And he had also produced a memoir, Conversations in Bloomsbury. And he was a member of the Bloomsbury group of writers that constituted people like Virginia Woolf, Lytton Strachey, E.M. Forster, and Clive Bell. And there were many great Bloomsbury writers. And Anand was also part of the Bloomsbury group of writers. It was at the time he was also a student in the Cambridge University. And so when we go into R.K. Narayan, we come to find the chronology of his novels. Swami and Friends, produced in 1935. And it was the first novel produced by Narayan against the Malgudi background. And it was followed by The Bachelor of Arts in 1937. And The Dark Room in 1938. And then Mr. Sambat, the printer of Malgudi, came out in 1949. The English Teacher came out in 1945. The English Teacher, Bachelor of Arts, and Swami and Friends are regarded as a trilogy. Swami and Friends, Bachelor of Arts, and the English Teacher are considered as a trilogy. And Narayan won Sahitya Academy Award for his novel The Guide in 1958. And after all, he produced novels like The Financial Expert in 1952 and Waiting for Mahatma in 1955 and Man-Eater of Malgudi in 1961. Remember the title, Man-Eater of Malgudi. So a Rakshasa-like character is introduced there, and he is named Vasu. And he was a taxidermist, and the special profession was that he stuffed the animals and sold them. And his profession was taxidermist. And after all, he was killed while beating a mosquito. He killed himself. And when there was a mosquito sitting at his bald head, he heavily attacked the mosquito, and the beating had given him his final death blow. And Narayan also produced a film script for Miss Malini. And after Narayan, we come to find Rajarao. And Rajarao was an Indian-American writer, and he studied from Paris and remained in America, working in the Texas University as professor. He is popular for his novels like Kandapura, The Serpent and the Rope, The Cat and Shakespeare. So Cat and Shakespeare is actually a sequel to The Serpent and the Rope. And Kandapura was his first novel produced in 1938. And The Serpent and the Rope was autobiographical novel, and for this novel, he received the Sahitya Academy Award. And the sequel was called The Cat and Shakespeare. And there are also other novels like Comrade Kirilu, produced in 1976. And in 1988, he produced his novel, The Chess Master and His Moves. The Chess Master and His Moves. And in all the novels, we come to find the protagonists are in search for philosophical truths and spiritual knowledge. And they are actually found looking for a guru to lead them into the world of spirituality. And after Rajarao, and we come to find now Ananthamoorthy, the one popular Indian novelist who produced the novel Samskara Bharatipura, very popular Indian novelist in English. And he was also the Vice Chancellor of MG University for a few years. Ananthamoorthy. And he won the Jnanavida Award also. Jnanavida seems to be one of the most coveted awards given in India. And he won Jnanavida Award also in 1994. And I told you that he was the Vice Chancellor of MG University. So, and after all, he won National Film Festival Awards. And for this National Film Festival Awards, so his Samskara was taken into consideration. Samskara was produced in a film with a screen written by Ananthamoorthy, and for that he was awarded National Film Festival Award for the best story. And for best feature film also, it was the film Samskara was awarded. And Ananthamoorthy received Padma Bhushan in 1998. And Ananthamoorthy actually was born in India in a village called Melingi in Tirthali Taluk in Shimoga district. And he studied in the Durvasapura schools, and after all went to Mysore and studied at the Mysore University, and he became a professor of English in the Mysore University. Then he got a chance of continuing his study in England, and he went to England and did his PhD there. And very interestingly, his guide was Malcolm Bradbury, a very famous British novelist, Malcolm Bradbury. And Ananthamoorthy, after all, returning to India, started writing novels, and his first novel, Samskara, was written as he was in England. And after all, the novel Samskara was translated into English. It was written in Kannada language. And it was translated by A.K. Ramanujam. Ramanujam, a very popular poet and scholar of India. And while translating the book, Ramanujam gave a subtitle to the novel, and it was a right for a dead man. And Samskara is actually a Sanskrit word referring to culture. So culture is actually Samskara. And the novel was translated by A.K. Ramanujam. And it was subtitled A Right for a Dead Man. Actually, the story is the story of the burial of a man who was a Brahmin but lived a non-Brahminical life. And he was named Naranappa. Naranappa was a Brahmin, and he lived in Durvasapura in a Brahmin Agrahara. But he lived the life of a non-Brahmin, and he kept with him a concubine, a prostitute lady named Chandri, belonging to a lower caste. And the Brahmins in the Agrahara couldn't accept him living with a concubine. And after all, he used to drink liquor also, and he ate non-vegetarian foods with the Muslims. And he was hated by the Brahmins in the area. And the novel actually tells the story of the burial of Naranappa. Naranappa is not at all a very important character here. And it is actually the story of Naranappa's death and burial. And Naranappa became dead, and it became a big problem that the Brahmins could not do the rites because he lived a non-Brahminic life. The Brahmins of the area could not do the rites for the burial. But at the same time, he was dead in the Agrahara, and the other Brahmins in the area could not eat or drink until the body is cremated. And the Brahmins are not prepared to do the rites for the burial. And it became a big problem. And after all, there was a leader of the Brahmins called Praneshacharya. And he was a man in his late 30s. And he seems to be the most important person presented in the novel, Praneshacharya, in his late 30s. And he was the head of the village. And the Brahmins went to him for advice. What they could do with the dead body of Naranappa. Naranappa was dead, and what they could do with Naranappa. And Praneshacharya searched the holy books like Manusmriti, and he could not find an answer for the problem. And he could not actually find an answer for the problem of the burial of Naranappa. And it was at the time the concubine named Chandri, the girl belonging to the lower caste, approached Praneshacharya and knelt at his feet and offered him all her jewelry, and she had some jewelry with her. And she placed the jewelry at the feet of Praneshacharya. And when the Brahmins found Chandri offering her jewels, golden jewelry, the Brahmins were prepared to do the burial because they could get money. But Praneshacharya didn't permit the Brahmins to do the rituals for the burial. And after all, Praneshacharya could not find an answer to the solution. And he went into the Hanuman temple. There was a Maruti temple. And the Brahmins used to come there worshipping Hanuman. And he went to the Maruti temple and prayed to Hanuman, asking for a solution to the problem. But he could not get an answer to the problem even when he stayed there all through the evening until nightfall. And at nightfall, he came out and he wanted to return home. In the darkness, he found Chandri. And he went into Chandri and consummated his love with Chandri. See, Praneshacharya consummated his love with Chandri. He saw Chandri and she tempted him, and he fell to the temptation of Chandri. There and then, it was at the same place, he fell into the temptation of Chandri. And the sexual relationship transformed Praneshacharya, and he returned home, but could not find an answer. What could be done? He didn't actually know what could be done to bury the dead body of Naranappa. And at the same time, we come to find that Praneshacharya had already married man, and his wife was an invalid, a handicap named Bhagirathi. And Praneshacharya used to bath her every morning and spend most of his time with her. And after all, he took his breakfast after feeding his invalid wife Bhagirathi. And after feeding his cow also in the morning, he took his breakfast. And he led such a very pure and pious life. And he had been living with Bhagirathi for all these years, but with no sexual relationship because she was invalid. And she could not give him a son. And now he has consummated his love with Chandri. And Bhagirathi herself asked Praneshacharya to get married with another lady and to have children. But Praneshacharya refused to marry another lady and remained with his wife Bhagirathi. And by the time when Praneshacharya returned home, Bhagirathi was dead. And he made arrangement for the burial of Bhagirathi. And at the same time, there was the dead body of Naranappa, and nothing could be done. And it was a big problem in Durvasapura, in the Agrahara. And after all, Praneshacharya could not give an answer to the problem. And even when Chandri approached him and wanted his permission to use her people for the burial, Praneshacharya didn't permit her do it using her people. And Chandri went to her people and asked them to do the burial of Naranappa. But the lower caste people were afraid of Brahmins and they refused to do it. And Chandri then approached the Muslims and she found a fish seller named Ahmad Bari, B-A-R-I, Bari, Ahmad Bari. And it was he who cremated the body secretly. And the cremation of Naranappa was over. And Chandri, after the burial, was found weeping, and she left the place and returned to Kundapura. She returned to Kundapura. It was her birthplace. And Praneshacharya's wife being dead, and the cremation over, and the burial of Naranappa was also over, and the position of Praneshacharya seemed to be slightly very difficult because he could not give an answer to the Brahmins, and the burial was done by a Muslim named Ahmad Bari. And when it came to be known to the Brahmins, so they actually stood against Praneshacharya. They didn't actually want to get advice from Praneshacharya anymore. So Praneshacharya decided to leave the village Durvasapura, and he started walking. And on the way, he was joined by a young man named Putta, P-U-T-T-A, Putta. And Putta was a man of a low caste, belonging to a low caste community called Malere. Malere, M-A-L-E-R-E. And Putta was actually on his way to Milinga. He was a young man. And Praneshacharya tried to shake him off, and he actually wanted to follow Praneshacharya. And he came and started speaking with Praneshacharya. And Praneshacharya actually wanted to be alone. He didn't want any companions. But this young man, Putta, started following him and started asking him many number of questions. He followed Praneshacharya. And when Praneshacharya sat under a tree, he also sat under the same tree. And then he took out a matchbox and a few beedies and started smoking the beedies. And Praneshacharya then got up and started walking. And Putta also followed him. Praneshacharya told Putta not to follow him. And when Putta found Praneshacharya walking barefooted and he got no chappals, Praneshacharya was a guru, a Brahmin leader, not in the habit of wearing sandals. And Putta told him that he should have to wear sandals, otherwise, so his feet would be broken. And he advised Praneshacharya to buy sandals. And he told Praneshacharya when they would reach the temple, he would buy chappals for Praneshacharya. And that there is a festival in the temple there. And after all, so he followed Praneshacharya and started speaking eloquently, disturbing Praneshacharya, even asking a few riddles like a river was there and there was a boat and there was a ferryman, and he actually wanted to take a bundle of grass across the river, and there was a tiger and there was a cow, and at the same time the boat could carry only one person. If tiger is taken, cow cannot be taken, and if cow is taken, tiger cannot be taken, and if the man is taken, the grass cannot be taken. And how these all things can be transported across the river. And these kind of riddles were asked by Putta. Putta disturbed Praneshacharya. And finally they reached the temple and found that there was a festival taking place in the temple, and there were hundreds of people, ladies, men, children, and there were the vendors of various things. And so Putta was very happy, in fact, to see all these things. And he wanted Praneshacharya also to follow him. And Putta took his food from the area there. And Praneshacharya, being a Brahmin, could not eat from the hotels there. And in fact, Putta wanted him to go to the temple and to get the Nivedya from the temple. And Praneshacharya went to the temple and started eating the Nivedya there. And so there were the other Brahmins asking him about his name, about his place, about his clan, about his mission, and such all things. He was disturbed by the other Brahmins. And Praneshacharya was given coconut and jaggery by Putta. And Praneshacharya actually could not find a way. He didn't actually know what to do. And for some time, he thought of returning and living with Chandri. And he abandoned the idea and remained in the ground of the temple. And actually, the novel comes to its close without a conclusion. And very interestingly, A.K. Ramanujam concludes the translation saying, the novel ends but does not conclude. The novel actually ends, but it does not conclude. And we find Praneshacharya taking a bullock cart and traveling, but reaching nowhere. And the driver of the bullock cart asked him where he wanted to go. And Praneshacharya only looked into the air. And he actually didn't know where to go. And when the novel comes to its close, the translator A.K. Ramanujam says that the novel ends but does not conclude. And this is the first novel produced by U.R. Ananthamoorthy. And his original name is Udupi Rajagopalacharya Ananthamoorthy, a very popular Indian writer in English, Kannada writer and literary critic. And he was professor of English for a long time. And he was chancellor of the Central University and was vice chancellor of MG University in Kerala. And he was a visiting professor of various universities in India and abroad. And he did his PhD from England. And Malcolm Bradbury, the famous English writer, was his guide in his PhD work. And he was a writer with a criticism on the community, and he always criticized the nationalistic political parties also. And he was against the Bharatiya Janata Party and RSS, and he stood against Modi also. And he was a vociferous critic, a loud critic of Hinduism. And his works have been translated into various Indian languages and European languages also. And the major works produced by Ananthamoorthy are Samskara, Bhava, Bharatipura, and Avaste. And Samskara is the first novel produced in 1965. And the English translation came out in 1976. And it was also made into a film by Pattabhi Rama Reddy. Pattabhi Rama Reddy was actually a Telugu film director, but he took up the story of Samskara produced by Ananthamoorthy. It was Ananthamoorthy who produced the film script for Samskara. And very interestingly, the role of Praneshacharya was played by Girish Karnad. And we remember Girish Karnad playing the role of Praneshacharya, the protagonist of the story. The important character of this story is Praneshacharya, the leader of the Brahmins, and the one Brahmin leader who came to be confused with number of problems. And Samskara was set in Durvasapura, and it was an Agrahara, a closed-off Brahmin community that lives according to tightly built rules and norms. And the Brahmins lived there under tightly built rules and norms. And the story actually begins with the death of Naranappa. Naranappa was a man who lived non-Brahmanically. He was a Brahmin who lived non-Brahmanically. And he lived with a concubine named Chandri, a lower caste lady. And after all, he used to drink alcohol and eat non-vegetarian foods and made friendship with the Muslims also. And when he became dead, it became a big problem to the Agrahara people. And the burial could not be done. And the question, who would do the rites for the burial. There are a number of rites to be performed for the burial of a Brahmin. And it should be done by the Brahmins, but the Brahmins in the Agrahara refused to do the rites for Naranappa because Naranappa lived a non-Brahminical life. And they went to Praneshacharya, and Praneshacharya was the religious leader of the Agrahara. And he was a learned man. And he was well versed in the Hindu scriptures. And normally he was the one person who used to advise the Brahmins on various issues. And now Naranappa did, and what could be done? And they approached Praneshacharya. And Praneshacharya searched the holy books, but could not find an answer. And after all, he wanted the Brahmins not to do the rites for him and to wait until he returns with an answer. And he promised the Brahmins that he would return with an answer. And the burial became a big problem because when a Brahmin is dead in the Agrahara, no one will be permitted to eat or drink until the body is cremated or buried. And the Brahmins could not eat or drink. And they wanted actually to get an advice from Praneshacharya. And Praneshacharya could not find an answer from his scriptures. And after all, Chandri, the low-caste concubine of Naranappa, approached Praneshacharya and wanted his permission to bury the dead body of Naranappa with the help of her lower caste people, or to do the Brahmins to do the burial, to complete the rites of the burial. And she approached the Praneshacharya and she knelt at his feet and offered all her jewelry. And when the Brahmins found the jewelry, the Brahmins were prepared to do the rites for the burial because they wanted to get gold. But Praneshacharya didn't permit them to do the burial. And he told them that he would go to the temple and would get an answer from the Murti there. And after all, he wanted the Brahmins to wait for the answer. And he went to the Marathi temple and prayed to Hanuman. And after all, he waited for a long time there, but didn't get any revelation. And it became dark, and he came out from the temple. And in the darkness, there was and on time, and consummated his long engaged in sexual intercourse with somebody. And in the film, we come to find Praneshacharya waking up from her lap a few hours later and getting up and asking where was he and which was the place. And it was dark, and then he was made to return to his home. And after all, he returned home. And when we go into the life of Praneshacharya, we come to find that he is a married man. And he has got his invalid wife, Bhagirathi, a handicap. And there was no sexual relation between him and his wife for all these years. And he had no children at all. And Bhagirathi actually wanted Praneshacharya to marry another lady and to have children. But Praneshacharya refused to get married with another lady. And he was very sincere in dealing with the matters of his wife. And normally his day started with bathing her, giving her a bath in the morning. And after all, he took his breakfast only after feeding his wife Bhagirathi and the cow. And Praneshacharya actually led a very pious and sanctified life. But his sexual intercourse with Chandri transformed him. He became a changed man. And he could not find an answer. And he refused to give answer to the Brahmins. And so by the time Chandri approached her people and wanted to do the burial, but the lower caste people were afraid to do the burial. They were afraid of the Brahmins. And then Chandri approached the Muslim community, and a fish merchant named Ahmad Bari secretly cremated the dead body of Naranappa, and the burial of Naranappa was over. And Chandri At the burial of Naranappa, wept loudly, and after all, she left Durvasapura and went to Kundapura, her own native village. And by the time the wife of Pranayacharya became dead, and the cremation of Bhagirathi was over, and Pranayacharya had nothing to do in the Agrahara. Therefore, he left the Agrahara and started walking. With no aim at all, he started walking. And as he started walking, he was joined by a young man named Putta. And he belonged to a lower caste called Meliri community. And Putta was on his way to Meligi, another village. And his name is Putta. And he is a very interesting character in the Nobel. And Pranayacharya tried to shake him off, asking him to leave Pranayacharya. Pranayacharya actually wanted solitude. And he actually wanted to think of his future and what that he can do in the future. And he wanted solitude, but Putta accompanied him and disturbed him. So, and Putta asked a few questions to Pranayacharya and followed him wherever Pranayacharya went. And when Pranayacharya sat under a tree, Putta also sat under the tree. Like a pest, he followed Pranayacharya. And he took out a matchbox and beedies and started sitting there smoking the beedies. And he became a big disturbance to Pranayacharya. And when Putta found that the Acharya didn't have a sandal, that he was barefooted, Putta advised him to have sandals also, and promised that he would buy sandals for him when they reach the festival area of the temple. And then he asked a few riddles to Pranayacharya also. There are many number of very interesting riddles. And Pranayacharya knew the answers, but he was not interested in giving the answers. If he would give the answer, Putta would ask again the next riddle and he would be in trouble. And he wanted actually solitude and peace of mind. But Putta accompanied him, disturbed him, pestered him. And after all, they reached the festival ground of the temple and found that there were thousands of people, men, women, children, old men, and then merchants. And there are many types of exhibitions. And Putta gave money and got into a screened area to look into a kaleidoscope to see the pictures there. And Putta quite often came from the area and again accompanied Pranayacharya and asked him to go with him to eat his meal. But Pranayacharya could not eat from the local hotels because the hotels were run by non-Brahmins. And then Putta asked him to go to the temple to have the Nivedya. And Pranayacharya went to the temple and sat near the leaf waiting for his food. And there were the other Brahmins, and the Brahmins asked him about his clan, about his name, and about his plan. And he was disturbed by all the people who came near to him. And he wanted solitude and he wanted to escape from the place. And he came out from the place and found that Putta was there with coconut pieces mixed with jaggery. And he offered Pranayacharya the coconut pieces mixed with jaggery. And Pranayacharya ate a piece of coconut. And after all, when he found a cart, he jumped into the cart and wanted the cart driver to take him away. And when the cart driver asked him where he wanted to go, Pranayacharya didn't know where he actually wanted to go. Formerly, he thought of returning to Chantri, but he abandoned the idea. And now he has got no place to reach. And after all, so the novel comes to its close without a conclusion. And Ramanujam, the translator of the novel, says the novel ends but does not conclude. And this novel was made into a film, and the role of Pranayacharya was played by Girish Karnad. Girish Karnad is a popular film actor also, and he acted in Malayalam films also. In Neelakurinji Puthapol, that he played a role, and in The Prince also he played the role of Mohanlal's father. And Karnad was a film actor also, and when Samskara was made into a film, it was he who played the role of Pranesh Acharya. And one important novel written by Ananthamoorthy is Bharatipura, another important novel. And Bharatipura was translated into English by Sushila Punitha. Samskara was translated into English by A.K. Ramanujam. And Bharatipura was translated into English by Sushila Punitha, who was an English teacher. Sushila Punitha. And the novel was written in 1973, and the translation appeared in 2010. And see, Ananthamoorthy died in 2014 due to kidney trouble and heart attack, and he died when he was 81 years old. And Bharatipura was written by him in 1973, and the novel was translated by Sushila Punitha. And Bharatipura is actually the name of the town in which the story is set. The story is set in the town called Bharatipura. And Samskara is set in Durvasapura, and Bharatipura, the novel, has its setting in Bharatipura. And the protagonist of the novel is a Brahmin, a rich Brahmin named Jagannatha. And most often, the characters of Ananthamoorthy are Brahmins. Ananthamoorthy himself was a Brahmin, and he never supported the Brahminic way of living. And he actually wanted to expose the corruption found in the Brahminical lifestyle. And in most of the novels, we come to find Ananthamoorthy exposing the false practices found in the Agraharas. And Bharatipura was named after the town in which the story is set, and the protagonist of Bharatipura is a Brahmin named Jagannatha. And Jagannatha went to England and did his studies there and remained there for 6 years, fell in love with an English lady and stayed with her for a few years, and after all, leaving the lady, he returned to India. And when he came to India, he identified that the highly orthodox and conservative approach of the Brahmins in Bharatipura was hateful. He detested the highly orthodox and conservative approach of the people at Bharatipura. And he wanted to change all that, and he became a radical. So when he returned to Bharatipura, he wanted to change the people living there, the attitude of the people. And so in the area, there were the Brahmins and there were the lower caste people. And Brahmins never tried to maintain good relation with the lower caste people. And the Brahmins were the masters, and the lower caste people were the slaves. And they didn't permit the lower caste people enter the temple. And in Kerala also there were the Guruvayur rebellion. And there were the question of the Ambala Pravesha Vilambara. The lower caste people were not permitted to enter the temples. The lower caste people wanted to enter Guruvayur temple, and they fought for it. And so it came to become a part of the Indian freedom struggle. And Gandhi also involved in the issue. And A.K. Gopalan was the leader of the group of the protesters. And the same happened in Bharatipura also. There was a famous temple called Manjunatha. And after all, the Brahmins didn't permit the lower caste people to enter the Manjunatha temple. And Jagannatha secretly entered the temple and took the Shivalinga out and threw it into the river. And after all, when the Brahmins came to the temple, they could not find the linga, and they made an outcry, and they thought that the lower caste people might have entered the temple and stole the linga. And after all, it was Jagannatha who let the lower caste people enter the Manjunatha temple. Even when the lower caste people didn't want to enter, they were not at all interested in entering the temple, and they were happy with their living conditions. And they never wanted to fight against the Brahmins, but Jagannatha prompted them to enter the temple and to enjoy equal rights with the Brahmins in the village. And the book actually describes the episodic journey of Jagannatha as he grapples with the questions of untouchability and caste. And we find Jagannatha fighting against the question of untouchability and caste. Bharatipura, almost like a samskara, and both exposes the evil practices in the Brahminic community, and the fight against the Brahminic community can be found in both the novels. And these two novels are very popular novels by Ananthamoorthy. And Samskara was written in 1965, and Bharatipura was written in 1973. And Samskara was translated by A.K. Ramanujam in 1976. And Bharatipura was translated by Sushila Punitha in 2010. And these are the important things that we have to remember. Thank you for typing.